No, sorry. 2, 3, 4, 6 off?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, 6 off, and then case. Okay?
You need, oh, you got enough paper?
Yeah. All right, everyone ready?
Here's your, oh.
So I got this.
Okay.
Everyone ready?
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. Wait a second. I'm not ready.
Okay.
Now go.
First off, the topicality of enforcement and interpretation is that enforce means to do more than just passing a law, passing a plan, or in this case, engaging in just like funding. You have to actually enforce it. They're never going to be able to enforce this. You will not be able to meet under this definition. Your violations, they don't do this. They don't fulfill this. The standards are going to be one, predictability. We have to have predictable, predictable passing of a plan. The U.S. federal government should have passed a plan. They shouldn't just be funding this in another place. The second is ground. They limit the ground, and they limit the ground because we're only focusing on a certain place. Next does breadth over depth. We have to talk about a broader issue rather than just a specific issue. The next argument is limits. We have to have larger limits of this round. We can't just talk about this with these specific limits. The next is reasonability. It's not reasonable to talk about the specific issue. The next argument is that each word has meaning. They don't fulfill the burden of each word. Vote on a priori fairness and education. Fairness and education are the biggest impacts in this round because they have a real world effect. You look here first. Second T is strengthened. Okay, so the interpretation is that they can't get strengthened because again they're just funding this. They don't actually specify how they're going to strengthen this. In fact, you don't even know if they're going to strengthen this. They don't tell you how. They just say, oh, we're going to provide funding. Yeah, we provide funding to other things. That doesn't mean it's going to strengthen the enforcement mechanism. Okay, cross apply or violation is that they don't fulfill this. And the next is the standards. Cross apply all the standards on the voters. These are 2 T's. You can look here first. Yeah. Okay, next is U.S. federal government solvency deficit. The federal government is too costly in pork barrel when they try to fund something. They're going to lead to more bureaucratic inefficiencies and more pork barreling. The second one is that a one-size-fits-all approach fails. This is especially true when we're funding the tribes. We need to have multiple flexibility in order to fund the tribes in the right way. Third is that the federal government gets bogged down in bureaucratic inefficiencies, especially important with the Department of Tribal Affairs because they've had a ton of tribal inefficiency. This is especially important in a recession where money is tight in the government. The 4% solvency deficit limits the ability to have the tribes' ability to innovate, and innovation is key to keep the U.S. and the tribes competitive in a world of 5. Is that the federal government increase in power leads to more centralization, dictatorship. This ties into their colonialization because the federal government is funding another source. We'll get to that later. The next is the federal government has a problem of departmental factionism. This is especially true when there's multiple funding sources for tribes. We don't know which one is going to work out. The next is that let's see here. Yeah, that's enough, and then we're going to go specific solvency deficit. They don't have a large enough scope to be solvent. They have to talk. They're only focusing on a very small portion of this. They're not talking about a large the entire border. They're not going to be able to control the entire border. The next is going to be a biopower K versus a framework. Evaluate the K prior to everything else because we're questioning the methodology and the epistemological assumptions of this and the interpretations. And they gets one unconditional test of the representations, epistemology, and ontology of the PMC. Next is that bad methodology leads to bad policy. This is especially important because we're the future policymakers of tomorrow. We have to have some sort of change in our ideology. This is going to be have a real world effect. And the next is we have to examine our ontology. This ties into their colonialization arguments. We're being colonialized, or they're being colonialized. The power because they're funding colonialization and they're funding this tribal mechanism. I'll get to that later. Next is this is going to have real world impacts. Discourse shapes reality. Proper discourse leads to proper policy. The debaters will be future policymakers. So college debate is a good setting over K. Next is about digging deeper in the power relations is essential in this age. Power and knowledge are co-productive and must be interrogated. The links is that they use the U.S. federal government, which by definition uses biopower against the tribes. This is especially important because in the past the tribes have been used biopower against them, and again ties into colonialization. The next one is that they use private or they don't use private ownership. Sorry. The next one is that they engage in using specifically the tribal affairs department. This is especially true because bureaucracy, or especially biopower, because they've established locuses of power in which they're able to institute biopower on specific groups. The next one is that they use...
Not to mention that what it does to Mexico.
Also what it does to Mexico, because we're enforcing our U.S. dominance and our biopower on Mexico, which is an independent country which kills sovereignty. The next is that the threat of military force, and the threat of military force even within this wolf pack group is still going to be really negative because it forces us into a colonialization mindset where we're enforcing military force. Military force is the definition of biopower because we're backing up our attempts to use power and knowledge with the threat of force. Okay, now C is the impacts. First, it destroys all value of life to 0 point in the Holocaust. Biopolitics is the root cause of all violence. This means that they try to quantify things into specific scenarios. That's not going to work. The next is that it decreases personal autonomy. This is especially important because the tribes need personal autonomy. In the past, we've colonialized them. We need to stop this right now. This is important because since it's the root cause of all violence, if we can dehumanize one group, we can dehumanize all groups and leads to potential for genocide. You can just look to Nazi Germany where they dehumanized, the first they dehumanized the Gypsies and the Jews. It led to a large-scale dehumanization. Next is that extinction biopower allows for the destruction of all life. When you have all life is put at the 0 point, the Holocaust, all life is destroyable. D is the alternative. The alternative is to reject the prevailing institutional biopower-based logic of the PMC. The alternative is to reject the prevailing institutional biopower-based logic of the PMC. Okay, so the perm, they've already talked about this representation. They can't perm. It's hypocritical and it's structural imposition. They can't only do part of the K. You have to do all the way. Perm is severance. Okay, now move to Second Amendment cartel backlash first. Okay, unique as cartels across the border use guns to commit their crimes and facilitate committing related crimes of domestic violence and gang-related crimes. Next, Arizona kidnapping rates are really high, and they're selling women for the sex trade. The next argument is that they sell of guns to youth and traps the youth into a life of crime and build around a future of crime. 3 is that the drug crime obviously link is that the plan presses cartels and challenges their regional power. The internal link is that this pressure will cause them to reassert their power and increase their crimes. But the next internal link is that more kidnappings will happen, the more women will be sold into sex slavery with no chance of escape and life of dehumanization. More young people will be turned to gangs with no alternative. This is a visible lifestyle. Next internal link is that more murders of Americans. The impact is going to be one, people will be uniquely dehumanized through sex abuse and criminal recruiting. The next impact is going to be people will die from increased cartel violence. The internal link to its own impact of the United States. They don't solve. Okay, next is Second Amendment backlash. Actually, I'm going to get back to this. I'm going to get to case real quickly. Is that okay?
Yeah, go case.
Okay, first case.
Time.
First, cross-apply all the substantial arguments. They have zero solvency, or say it doesn't matter how good their arguments are, so long as they're outside the burden of the resolution. So this kills, these 2 T's kill all of it. The next is debt parametricizing. You cross-apply all the arguments I said about T, how they're limiting the scope of the resolution. This is bad because we talk about breadth over depth. The next one is it's totally unfair because they're talking about a specific argument. The next one is that parametrics is just really bad because you can't talk about a specific policy. We don't have access to that policy. We didn't know they're going to run this. Okay, so on the first advantage turn, this increases the militias and this increases specific, or not militias, but the wolf pack, which we don't be able to control because we're just funding it. We're not using any enforcement mechanisms. The next argument is turn. Next argument is turn. There's going to be more jurisdictional questions about the tribe since we're imposing upon this. We're funding them. We don't know what the jurisdictional level will be. There's no bright line. The next argument is uniqueness overwhelms the link. You can't solve because there's only a small amount of funds. It's only one it's not going to solve the entire cartel violence. So next is that the backlash DA turns this entire advantage. This means that we get all of their impacts. Next is they say that yeah. Okay, next one. You want anything else on that?
No, that's
okay. 2 is sovereignty.
Wait. And it helps the Mexican economy. A third of the Mexican economy is built around the drug trade.
A third of the Mexican economy is based on the drug trade. This will collapse the Mexican economy. A second advantage is that colonialization funding. This is still going to be colonialization. They're still going to be funding this. In fact, turn colonialization is going to be more because funding is the internal route. When you fund something, you have to direct control over what the mechanism of colonialization will be. That they don't. And also, next turn is whitewashing. We don't think about this anymore because we're just funding them. Saying, oh, we're decolonializing them. We don't have to think about this anymore. But that we're still we were still colonialized. And then the next is that a unique overwhelms the link. This can't solve colonialization. There's only one specific tribe. This doesn't matter. That doesn't matter that we're not going to we're going to still be colonializing other tribes. They say they're internal link to all violence, justified war. They don't say how this happens. Just because you dehumanize one group doesn't mean that's going to lead to genocide or war. You're going to prefer our specific interpretations in the Biopower K. Okay, I can't get to the other.
That's fine.
Okay, I'm just going to keep going. Okay, so we have Biopower K, which outweighs. I give you turns on all their cases. We have T. We have huge solvency deficits and DA. You'll prefer our definitions.